Welcome back to another episode of the Outdoor Adventures Hunting Podcast right here on Brownfield Ag News. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Brent Barnett, and I'm happy to have a friend on the show today. Noel Gandy is with us from Southern Iowa. Noel, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm always excited to talk with you, Brent. This is exciting.
Well, it's good to have you back on the show. I know we've had you on a few times in the past over the last year and a half or so. But, just for anyone that maybe missed those interviews, Noel, just remind them a little bit about yourself and some of the work you do producing hunting content.
Yeah. So I'm a Mississippi boy by birth. I moved to Southern Iowa, like you said, about 8 years ago. So the reason I moved is because I'm actually a pastor here in southwestern Iowa, and that's been a blessing. The church is going great. But 7 years ago, I started working with Buck Ventures Outdoor, their television show, and I helped film for Buck Ventures kind of as a freelance gig. But then we created a spinoff show called The Woodsman, and I'm a character. I don't know if character is the right word, but I'm one of the people who hunt and produce content for The Woodsman. So it's been surreal, really. I never in my wildest dreams thought we'd be doing this, but outdoor television's always been a big part of my life growing up, man. 6, 7 years old, we'd go to the video store, which was a mom and pop deal, and rent hunting, VHSs to watch just over the weekend. And now getting to be on some of that. So it's a pretty neat deal.
I have to ask. So occasionally I get some, pop-up suggested posts in my social media. A lot of times there'll be some from Buck Ventures that pop in there, and there's always a highlight clip of you turning around at the camera. You're up in a tree, and you're like, "What just happened?" What is that from? I must have missed that one.
What just happened? That that's a wild deal because we didn't know that was going to make anything. I killed a deer in 2019, the imposter. In fact, our mutual friend Lance Cornelius, he was filming for me, and so that was the second season of The Woodsman. And I guess that's what I said right after. I go black, man. Like everything that ever happens, I can't speak for everybody, Brent, but everything that ever happens in front of that camera is 100% genuine. It's just my personality, what comes out. And we've done it so much now, you almost forget the camera's there. But I turned around and looked at Lance because that deer, he comes in and we literally saw him for I think it was like 6 seconds. The time we saw him and the time I put an arrow through him. And that was just a genuine reaction. So the reason that pops up so often, though, is because My Outdoor TV, which is where The Woodsman aired exclusively for 5 years, they took that clip and put it in a bunch of their commercials. Again, unbeknownst to me, I saw it for the first time as just like you did on a suggested reel kind of a thing. And so that's cool too, by the way. Just scrolling mindlessly through Facebook, and then you get to rehash this memory that was so good.
Yeah, I had to ask you about that because I see it all the time, and I'm like, "Oh, hey, there's Noel." So
It's real too, because it's like it's a little out of focus and like the light's not great. We're just rednecks that are they put a camera in our hands. So we're having to figure it out a little bit too as we're going.
Yeah. Hey, you brought up your work as a pastor. I wanted to ask about that. Um how have you been able to, really help with your faith while you're hunting? Can you just maybe touch on that a little bit, how that connects with the outdoors?
Oh my goodness, it's easy for me, Brent, because you can go, and if you have the mindset, especially as a man of faith, that this is not what you were created for. You were created to bring glory into the Lord, which is kind of how I live. It takes a lot of pressure off, for one, whether you get something or not. But two, one of the things that I've just championed over the years is not to be so enamored with creation, but more so with the creator. Like everything is so awesome. You wake up and watch the woods wake up, or you watch a sunset or fresh snowfall, on the ground, and everything's beautiful. You can remember that all that is good, but the creator is great. and that, man, that reels you back in a lot of times. And it does, it really increases your faith a lot of times. And then when something awesome does happen, the what just happened, type moments, glory to the Lord. You realize that all good things come from above, and you can appreciate that in the Lord that much more. I do try to, separate some hunting from church. Like, I have a lot of people who attend our church. They're not hunters at all. I don't know that I have any like anti by any means. But I do try to be very sensitive to that. So, I'm not using a lot of hunting illustrations or anything like that so much during church. Although people know that I'm a hunter.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, Noel, it's some really good spiritual time for me when I'm in the woods. It's just
Mhm.
that one-on-one time that you have with God.
Yeah. At Buck Ventures, we do an annual pro staff meeting, and it's a 3-day deal, but every evening we do present a gospel message of some sort. And one of the things that we have really driven home the past few years, because there's people from all walks of life who want to participate in the pro staff, and we welcome that. But one of the things that we really drive home is like to get rid of the phrase, uh, I'd rather be in a deer stand thinking about God than in church thinking about a deer or something like that. We try to get rid of that phrase, because a deer absolutely will not save you or get you any closer to, to heaven. And so uh, make the main thing always. And I think things tend to work out pretty well if we do.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that message
Yeah.
there, Noel. We have a lot to get to on the show today, and I know we don't want to take up too much of your time, but this 2023-2024 season, I know there have been some highlights and maybe some memories that you'll reflect on heading into next year. So let's just start from the top. How did Noel Gandy's season go this year?
All in all, man, this has been a massive success. I had a great year last year too, but it seemed a lot harder than this year. I was done in archery here in Iowa by October 21st. I arrowed my highest score in whitetail ever, which was just a surreal kind of a deal. And then the opening day of gun two, I took we kind of considered him a management buck, not so much because of antlers or anything like that, but because he was severely injured. And it was a 3-year-old buck. He like 140 some odd inches, but he had some severe injuries, so we took him. And to me, I'm tickled. I think that's incredible, because I've only sat for myself in Iowa, uh, like 5 sits and got two nice bucks. Whereas last year, I think it took 80 some odd sits and to get to. This year has been different. It's also been a blessing because for the very first time, I have a landowner tag to fill. Um, and so I hunted some other places first and got the deer killed, because our farm has not been greatly set up yet for deer hunting. We're in the throes of building that, but I have made some sits on my own farm, if for nothing else, just to say I've got to sit on my own dirt. So that's been awesome. And I actually had a couple of great encounters with bucks passing through, but have not spent a ton of time there. Um, but all in all, a very, very successful year. Probably uh, it would have by far and away been my best year ever had I actually connected on a deer that I shot at. I hunted in Kansas a lot more than I hunted in Iowa this year. And I had an arrow malfunction on the biggest buck of my life. He's the deer I went there to hunt. I tracked him kind of all summer and went there to hunt him. Finally got him in range late October, I would say, and had an arrow malfunction at 18 yards. Complete, didn't even come close to the deer. The arrow went off into oblivion. um, so anyway, that it would have by far and away been my best year ever, but it was still a really, really fun year.
Well, let's hear the story about that bow buck from the one that you said was in the highest scoring buck you had taken. I've
Yeah.
seen some pictures of it on social media, and he's just an absolute tank. Is this a deer that you had a lot of history with?
Not a lot of history, simply because I have chased a certain deer for 2 years on a different farm. And so I had a couple of pictures of this deer over the years, but nothing, not like I've put a bunch of time in chasing him. Lance and I found this deer over the summer on a permission farm that I have access to. And I honestly didn't think he was as big as he was. I thought he was going to be maybe in the 50s, and kind of put him in my back pocket. Kind of, he's living around there or whatever. Um, so yeah, we did. Again, I had a couple of pictures of him. I think he's 5-year-old deer. Um, but we found him this summer, and he just became closer and closer to daylight. As far as trail cameras were revealing over the course of about 2 weeks, and to a point to where I said, I think we can go kill that deer if we want to. And so we went in to shoot that buck. The first evening we saw him, he was way off in the distance, right at dark. And the second evening we hunted him, he came just right down Broadway, how we had hoped he would, coming from bedding to feed. One unique thing that the farmer did, and it actually is the second time he's done that since I've had permission on that farm since 2019. I killed in 2019 the what just happened bucks, the same exact stand, same scenario. The farmer has picked the inrows off of the corn, and he's left the rest of the corn standing except for the inrows, and this is right in the corner of a field. And so this buck trails from bedding to that cut corn when that's really the only thing cut in the neighborhood. And I told him, I said, if you want to keep doing that every other year, I'll be here for it, buddy.
Absolutely. Not a lot of people have had the opportunity, Noel, to come to full draw and have a buck of this caliber and bow range. What is that feeling like? I personally have not experienced it yet in my life, so I'm just curious, when you have caliber of this type of a buck in bow range, what's going through your mind and what's the process?
It works a lot better for me if I don't have a lot of time to watch the deer, which was the case for this guy. Uh, it's pretty surreal. I know everyone's different, but for me, I get inside my head big time, and like, man, you've waited for this. There he is. The deer, especially if it's one you have history with. It's just you kind of, I don't know. It's my mind tends to go to shambles. Honestly, you have to really rely on practice that, or for me, I shouldn't say everyone, but really rely on practice that you put in during the summer with your equipment. So everything is kind of muscle memory. And I have gotten better though, Brent, over the years of saying you've got to pick a spot. You've got to slow down, mentally. And so that's usually kind of chanting that to myself: slow down, calm down, Noel, calm down. In fact, I think you can audibly hear me say that sometimes. Uh, the past couple of times that I've come to draw on a buck, calm down, having to be very intentional. Some guys have ice water in their veins. I don't, and I get torn up. And but it's awfully, awfully cool when it does happen, man. I tell you, it is.
I felt like I had a breakthrough moment when it comes to this here. My 2021 buck that I took with my bow, I had been watching this deer for about, maybe 15, 20 minutes. He was feeding at about 50 yards away in the thick timber on some acorns. And we're getting down to last light in the evening. And this was October 9th, so pretty early in the season. And it was really hot that day. I think the temperature was close to 88. One of the hottest days I've ever bow hunted before. And I just remember going through different processes of getting adrenaline and shaking at different times and then calming down during that 15 minutes, and then it would come back up. And eventually, with just a few minutes before legal shooting light ended, he came forward and stepped at 25 yards. And I remember drawing back, and I felt myself rushing. Like my finger automatically jumped to the trigger. My pin wasn't settled yet. And it was just like all at once, I took this huge breath and I felt my body just completely calm down, settled my pin, had a nice surprise release on my release aid, and I had a perfect shot at 25 yards. Buck went 20 yards and fell over. Um, it was just like something I realized I needed to add to that process for me, which is slowing down, taking a big breath, and it just did wonders in that situation.
Taking that extra split second, you often have it, but in my mind, it's, oh, he's only going to be here. He's going to get away. But taking that extra split second usually, a lot of times, can be the difference in recovery and wounding or missing.
Yeah, definitely. We got a few minutes left, Noel. What were just some final takeaways from the season? And I mean this in the sense of what did you see as far as movement? Because where I've been located this year, this has been one of my toughest years I've ever had. I only had one deer in bow range all season. Or excuse me, up until my most recent hunt a few days ago, I had only had one deer in bow range all season, but then I had four does come through the other night. Didn't take one of them, but it's just been tough. I feel like the numbers where I'm at have been lower. I don't know if that's related to some of these reports we've heard this year of EHD throughout the state, but just in your area, and you don't have to specify where you are, but just overall, just some thoughts on movement this year.
I'm easy to find, so it specification doesn't matter too much as far as letting you know I'm in southwestern Iowa, and a lot of my hunting is in Fremont County. We actually had zero doe tags available this year. That's how poor uh, population has been. I've seen and heard the same things, Brent. How people are a lot are having the toughest years they've had in a long, long time. Uh, for me personally, it was kind of business as usual. But again, I was not out a ton. Um, I wasn't out 30 days, or anything like that. Probably 10 or 12. Uh, this is the first year ever that I've gone um, where I didn't get skunked, meaning that I saw a deer every sit. Now, Grant, be careful there because a lot of that was like the resident does, and I was seeing the same ones every day because they bed close by. But driving around wise, I do agree that there are far, far fewer deer out and about than I've seen, in the past couple of years. I attribute that where I am to EHD breakouts, and that's not a scientific explanation. It's just what I've observed. I know we found 5 deer on properties that I hunt that died in or near water late summer. I mean, you can just make assumptions. They weren't necessarily tested or anything, but make assumptions that that's what it was. I know our mutual friend Kent Boucher, he did a podcast where they found they called it, EHD Island or something like that. Just all these dead deer around. I do think that it's an issue. I attribute it to drought over the past several years. We have been in extreme drought in southwestern Iowa. I would say going on year 3, and water supplies is getting lower and lower and lower, and that encourages those midges to breed more and more and more around isolated pockets. Which that's what happens. These little bugs bite the deer, and it's a brutal thing. One of my target deer for next year we found dead recently in the middle of the neighbor's pond. Um, so it's tough. Um, the thing that I noticed the most, though, and I'll be brief, was the antler size, the antler growth. We during the summer we feed on our farms and kind of keep an idea. I have a really, really good idea on 2 particular farms which deer use those. I mean, clearly you have those that come and go, but there are some resident deer. Um, One in particular who I was super excited about, my dad actually took this year, a buck we called YY. He was a 4.5-year-old deer. Last year at 3.5, we had him at 160 inches. My dad took him this year at 4.5. He was 152. And so, and I know positively it was the same deer because he had his part of his ear was cut off. That's how we identified him. And within every antler, I think he survived EHD, Brent. Within every antler tip, the last 3 inches was hollowed out, almost like a tooth cavity, and his feet were all cracked up. The hooves were all cracked up, and apparently that's a sign of EHD. I think that he had survived. He did not survive lead poisoning, though, that first shotgun season when he came prancing out chasing the doe. So
Interesting thoughts. Hey, no, it's always good to talk to you, man. If any of the viewers or listeners want to stay connected with some of your content, how do they find you online?
Personally, I'm at Noel Gandy on pretty much everything, all the social media services. But our show airs, and you can see, uh, some of the footage that Lance and my friend Zach and I have put together for our show, The Woodsman. It airs on Sportsman Channel on Wednesdays. You can find Woodsman Buck Ventures, Instagram, YouTube, YouTube, Facebook, all those just quick searches, it'll pop right up.
Hey, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate the time, and we'll have to chat throughout the off season as we get ready for next year.
Look forward to it.
Again, that's Noel Gandy, and this is Brownfield's Outdoor Adventures. I'm Brent Barnett. Thanks for watching this week.